Ladies and gentlemen, let's all get up and welcome our Vice President, Joe Biden.
Hello, folks. How are you? Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Please sit down. Thank you very much. Mia, thank you for that. Thank you, man. Thank you for that introduction, and for the job that you're doing now as a state representative, and for the work you did on the issue that's nearest and dearest to my heart when you were in the Attorney General's office. You make us all proud. Mr. Chairman, it's good to be with you. I have an admission to make. We've actually are friends, and I hope that doesn't hurt his reputation. But Dick, you've been there for not only the folks here in South Carolina, but for the national ticket. You've been there for every Democrat around the country. I don't know anybody who's more effective in helping us raise money. And Jim, thank you for the invitation to be here. Jim called me and asked if I'd be willing to do this. And I said, Jim, I love going to South Carolina, but as soon as I show up in South Carolina, there'll be Washington Press coming down saying, is Biden getting ready? And so I got to make it clear that I'm here. I would have gone anywhere Jim asked me to go. And I'm delighted to be back here in South Carolina. And Em, I watched the tribute to you, Jim, and there's only one thing, and I mean this sincerely, that I don't think it captured about Jim. And that is that, folks, I got started in this business in 1972 when South Carolina had leaders, and actually in both parties, that were nationally known. They weren't just South Carolina senators and governors. They were nationally known. They were people who, in fact, had set a standard for an awful lot of other folks to repair in both parties. And the thing that I want you all to understand about Jim, his heart and soul is here in South Carolina. But everywhere I go around the country, in the last two presidential campaigns, as I travel over almost 600,000, over almost 700,000 miles just since vice president around the world, everybody knows Jim. And I mean that sincerely. They know him. They respect him. This guy has a backbone like a ramrod, and I tell you what, there's two things you got to know about him. There's two things you should know. One, he's smarter than you. And the other one is he never gives up. And Jim, you provided so much help for so many candidates all across the country that I don't think folks back home know. Maybe they know. But you are not only the number 3 man in the Congress, you are one of the leading voices in the Democratic Party nationwide. And it's an honor. It's an honor to work with you. And, I was going to say, as I look out in the audience, but I really can't see the audience. But I know from the folks I got to have some pictures taken with earlier, one of the great advantages of being around a while is I've been coming to South Carolina since 1973. And I've made some of the dearest and closest friends, not only in my political career, but personally. One of the things that happens when you try to run on a national ticket as you go around the country, and Fritz can tell you this, is that you get to see the country in a way you never would, and you get to make friends with people who are your lifelong friends, who unrelated to politics. If you called up the phone, you picked up the phone and called and said, I need your help, like if I call this guy. Nothing to do with politics, out of politics. They'd be there. They'd be there. I don't want to start naming names, but there's an awful lot of you who have been so good to me my whole career. And I really mean that. no one better to me than the man I'm going to talk about in a second, but another man that I got to know early on, who is, again, one of those national figures. Everybody knew what he stood for. Everybody knew what he was about. Governor Riley. Governor, you were not only a great governor and Secretary of Education, you have a moral compass that is hard to match. And I don't know whether he wants me to, he probably doesn't want me to say this, but I guess enough time has passed by the statute of limitations to protect us both. But I was given the authority in the Clinton administration when I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee to call the governor and try to talk him into going on to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And Governor, the court would have been better off for you being there. And but I respected then, and I respect now your decision. And John Spratt, John, we miss you, old buddy. We miss you. John has a moral compass that never, ever strayed. No one ever wondered when John Spratt stood up and took the floor. I mean this literally. No one ever wondered when John took the floor that John was saying the God's truth, John was saying exactly what the facts were, and John was laying out straight up. That's why he was so respected on both sides of the aisle. A lot of other old friends. Inez, thank you for the great job you've done for us. And to my old friend and Steve Benjamin, thanks for the passport to get into Columbia. And thanks for introducing me to your mom. I met your dad up at my house. Now I understand why you're the man you are. But look, we used to have a saying, as Jim knows, in the United States Senate, if you excuse a point of personal privilege. The man that I admire more than any man that I have served with, and I hate to admit this, but as the Senate historian pointed out when I got elected to my 7th term in the Senate and chose between being at the same time I was elected vice president, the Senate historian came in to try to make me feel better and said, now as Senator Biden's leaving to be sworn in as vice president, you should know that there's only 15 people in American history ever served as long as he did. And I thought, oh, God, what a... But the point I'm making is I've known a lot of senators. I've known more senators than all but 15 men in American history. And there's never been a better man. There's never been a better friend. There's never been a guy with more stand-up, flat-out courage and tell it like it is than Fritz Hollings. I'm not joking. I don't want to take too much of your time here, but I just want to tell you one thing. I hadn't planned on saying this, but you talked about my early start. There's only one reason I came to the Senate. I had planned on having my brother talk to the governor of my state after that accident and say I wasn't going to come. I wasn't going to be sworn in. There were 3 people that entered my life like a storm at the time. One was a guy named Mike Mansfield, had more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their whole body, the majority leader. Another one was a guy named Fritz Hollings. Fritz Hollings not only embraced me, he and Pete, but they did something else. They got me engaged. Remember Fritz telling me, just come for 6 months, Joe. We need you. You can leave after that. We had 58 Democratic senators. They didn't need me. But Fritz and Pete, in the days when we used to get along with one another, Democrats and Republicans, were part of a group of 5 senators, Republicans and Democrats. They'd once a month go to dinner with their spouses at another person's house. And Pete just dragged me into that as this 31-year-old bachelor who, and they, sounds corny, but they helped save my life. And Fritz, when I, 5 years later, when no man deserves one great love, let alone 2 in his life, when I met Jill and we got married, and I got a call from Fritz. Excuse me, I have a cold. And Fritz said, I want to have a little get-together to introduce as you know how Fritz talked, the colleagues to Jill. He, at his own expense, out of his pocket, he and Pete had every member of the Supreme Court, had the members of the cabinet, had all the Senate, and he put on a reception for me so everybody could meet Jill in the Senate caucus room. And Fritz, every stage of my career, both the high points and the low points, you've been there. And so when people say, why does Joe Biden, why is he so blunt? I sat next to Fritz for 32 years. What in the hell do you expect me to be? What do you expect? I learned from the best. I learned from the best. No one ever doubted Fritz meant what he said. Never. And so Fritz, you taught me a lot, and I make no apologies for trying to be a little bit like you. Thank you, buddy, and thank you for being here tonight. Folks, they said it's great to be back in South Carolina. I mean that seriously. As I said, I've forged an awful lot of relationships. Even so, Fritz once said to me, I was asked on Strom's deathbed, his wife called and asked whether I would do his eulogy. And you know, the Senate used to be a place where you could actually take a look at and try to find the best in other people. And I did Strom Thurmond's eulogy, after which Fritz said, hell, Joe, if you can do that, you got to do mine. And I said, hell, I'll be gone before you, Fritz. But all kidding aside, I remember the days when we all kind of worked together, man. We worked together. No matter how deep the philosophic differences were. You know, but it's particularly good to be back in South Carolina knowing you're about to get another Democratic congressional seat in the 1st District. You know, all you had to do is watch that debate to understand why Elizabeth is going to make such a great congresswoman. They ain't seen nothing yet. And folks, there's so many things I could talk about you all tonight, but you know, I just want to focus on one thing, with your permission. And that is, why I'm a Democrat, why are most of you Democrats? No matter what state you're from, why are you Democrats? There's one thing we all have in common with all the differences among us. We got a big tent and all that. But there's one thing that's the core of who we are, and that's our absolute, unfettered commitment to the middle class. Because we know this country was built on the backs and the shoulders of the middle class. We know that when the middle class does well, everyone does well. The wealthy get wealthier and the poor have a way up. But when the middle class is not growing, the poor are damned and the middle class are stuck. And ladies and gentlemen, you saw what happened to the policies we had to put up with for so many years before. You watched the middle class shrink. People having trouble they never had before. You know, economists, and I got a whole bunch of them, they'll talk to you about the middle class in terms of a dollar number. They'll say, well, middle class is $49,490 or $52,600. Middle class isn't a number. It's a value set. It's a way of life. It what makes the people in Delaware not a single bit different than the people in South Carolina. It's about being able to own your own home, not just rent it. It's about being able to send your kid to a good school, a neighborhood where it's safe. It's about being able to send your kid, if they do well enough in school, to college and know you. Do you know anybody, rich or poor, doesn't have the dream that their child someday will be able to go to college? I've not found any distinction anywhere in the world, anywhere in this country. It's about knowing you can do that. It's about being able to take care of your parents when they get old and hope that you put on A enough that you won't have to have your children take care of you. Where I come from, in Scranton and Wilmington, Delaware. But it's no different here. That's what being middle class means. It's being able to care for your family. It's being able to hold your head high. And all of a sudden, since the last election. Here are Republican friends talking about how much they value the middle class. No, they do. You hear it now. I'll bet it's going on over that silver elephant thing. I'll bet they're talking about the middle class. Oof. Anyway, I don't want to make any news tonight. Fritz would walk on the floor and say, well, Joltin' Joe, what you going to do today? I'm going to be good tonight, Fritz. I'm going to be good tonight. You know, Fritz knew my dad. My dad has a picture, which I now have, of my dad and mom when Fritz came up to Delaware to campaign for me. And I still have it, Fritz. You signed it to my mom and dad, and it's hanging in my library. So he knew my dad. My dad was a gentle, good man. My dad had an expression. He said, don't tell me what you value. When someone would say to me, Joe, his name was Joe, Joe, let me tell you what I value. And literally my dad would go, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. Don't tell me how you care about the elderly. Don't tell me how, show me your budget. So I think it's fair. Let's take a look at the other team's budget. We'll find out what they value. As Jim will tell you, over Jim's strong objection, they passed the budget again in the House of Representatives. The Ryan budget, the Republican budget. The budget they passed is absolutely no different than the one they passed last year that we debated in the election. The one they passed the year before and the year before that. You got to give them credit, Jim, for consistency. Look, Medicaid. They cut 21 million people out of Medicaid. What they don't tell you is it's not all poor folks who never had a job. These are the widows of middle-class backgrounds who are in nursing homes today only because of Medicaid. Where will they go? What will they do? Who will care for them? Tens of thousands of middle-class families in America struggling with children with autism or chronic disease. They get that extra health care from Medicaid. They paid their taxes. They continue to pay their taxes. What are they supposed to do now if this budget were to pass? How do they make it up? Medicare. Republicans say, we're going to save it. They're going to save it. The truth is they want to get rid of it, and that's not an exaggeration. What they want to do, and they've offered it again in the budget, Jim, they come back and say, put us in charge, and we'll replace that guaranteed benefit you paid for, you worked for your whole life. Here's what they're going to do. They'll give you a voucher. They're going to say to your mom, hey, Mom, here's a coupon. No, literally, not. That's what it is. You're going to get a coupon worth X amount of dollars. And no matter how sick you get, when you hit that number, you're finished. The Congressional Budget Office, a year and a half ago, looked at their first proposal. You know what they said? They said it would cost the average senior $6,500 more a year to get the same health care they're getting now. Where are these guys from? I'm being serious. Where are they from? What don't they understand about this country? What don't they understand about all those decent Americans who paid their whole life, who built this country, who fought in wars? Where do they think a 75-year-old is going to get another $6,500 to get the same health care they have now? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a totally different view. We strengthened Medicare. We extended his life into the 20s. We have a plan to make it work all the way. We've expanded, extended, and paid for the changes in Medicaid. Look what they do in education in terms of the middle class. Their budget, the same budget that they're fighting like the devil for. And I'll bet across the way, the silver elephant, they're making a case about this. They slash elementary and secondary education, special education. Early education. 230,000 kids, if this budget passes, would be thrown off a Head Start. 29,000 special education teachers, staff, aides for special education lose their jobs. Because of Jim's leadership, we've gone from 6 million to 9 million kids in school because of Pell Grants. How is that not good for America? How is that not good for America? In college, and they cut it. You know, as Emily knows my Jill. We're big fans of Emily. Jim's okay, but Emily is pretty special. We've had the honor of having Emily at the house, and she knows Jill. My wife teaches full-time. She's the first second lady ever to have a full-time job as a teacher. She teaches 15 credits a semester with no help, and she's done it full-time. And that's why she's not here with me tonight. Jill has an expression. She said, any country that out-educates us will out-compete us. Jim can tell you both as his days as a teacher and as the nation's leading Democrat on this issue of early education, all that education gap they talk about, all that gap, it exists before the kid steps into the first classroom. And so that's why the president proposed in the State of the Union that every child in America have access to pre-K. Because we found all the studies at your great universities here. Everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, every one of these studies shows that you give a kid at the front end a solid start when they're 5 years old. It increases exponentially the prospect they'll graduate. It increases exponentially the prospect they'll not get in trouble, in truancy, and or be arrested. It increases exponentially the prospects of them making it through. That's why we extended Pell Grants. That's why we continue to call for and keep the $2,500 tax credit for middle-class families. That's why we've set a goal we're going to reach that once again will lead the world in the highest percentage of college graduates. Most people, when I say that, say, don't we already? You know where we rank in the world? 17th. Out of all the nations in the world we're competing with, we rank 17th. We used to be number 1. How can we win the competition of the 21st century if we don't change that? Ladies and gentlemen, Republicans talk about the middle class and how they care about us. They care about safe neighborhoods. How many times you hear them talk about safe neighborhoods? Why do they cut the why do they cut the crime bill? Money for cops. Why do they zero it out? Because of the recession that we inherited, and your governors, Democrat and Republican, inherited, mayors and county executives, we've laid off over 15,000 local law enforcement people who had badges were out in the street and they're gone now. Surprise, surprise, crime is up. Surprise, we got a problem. They eliminated. Republican budget cuts 4,800 federal agents, 3,500 prison guards. You say, what difference does that make? Infrastructure. It makes a difference how your neighborhood, what your neighborhood looks like. Roads, bridges, highways, ports, manufacturing. What does the Republican budget call for? No money for infrastructure. Tax breaks for companies that continue to ship jobs overseas, which you've all learned a lot about in this state, the businesses you've lost. Cuts in programs to retrain people who've lost those jobs for new industries and new high-tech jobs. My father, everybody wondered, you know, Barack talks so much about me being from Scranton, Pennsylvania, the people of Delaware got angry. And they made me sound like I was, you know, a kid who climbed out of the coal mine with a lunch bucket in my hand, you know? But the truth is, my dad, after the war, didn't have a job that could raise his family on. So like a lot of your family, you know, in hard times, you went looking for the job. So he moved to Wilmington, Delaware. He moved down where my uncle was. He said, I'll be back in a year. He came home every weekend. When I get enough, we'll bring you all down. It'll be a good life. And he found a good job, brought us down. But from that time on, my brothers and my sister, if we heard once, we heard 50 times, every time you hear about someone losing a job. my dad would use the following expression: Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your respect, your sense of your self-worth in the community. I don't think these guys understand that. It's not just a paycheck. It's about who we are. It's about being able to hold your head up, being able to care for your family. And you can't do that without being able to make a decent wage with a decent standard of living. That's why we pushed from the beginning to bring manufacturing back home. We've created 500,000 new manufacturing jobs over their objection. That's why we're proposing to give tax breaks to companies that bring jobs home, not go abroad. Folks, there are 600,000 high-tech jobs in America that remain open today. Why? Because we don't have the trained personnel for them. That's why with Jim's leadership, we've been out there connecting business with the community colleges and saying, tell us what you need. For example, photovoltaic technology is, there's a great big new plant up in Michigan. Dow Kokum, hiring all kinds of people, decent wages. You have Siemens coming down into North Carolina, open up a brand new facility. Why? Because we got the best universities and the best community colleges in the world. So we're training them. These guys vote against all of that. They try to eliminate these programs. Look, that's why we continue to insist on investing in infrastructure. They're good, decent paying jobs, but they're also good for business. They increase productivity. They make us more competitive. No one knows better than Fritz and Jim in here, or Governor Riley and others who've served. No one knows that any better than folks in South Carolina. You understand why we need to upgrade our infrastructure, and why we have to invest in the port of Charleston, why we have to dig. No, I'm serious. Look, here's what's happening. The Panama Canal has been widened. So you got these massive ships able to come through now. But guess what? Most of the ports in the East Coast, they can't accommodate them. But if they can, it's real jobs. It's real money. It's real dignity returned to people. And so, folks, Jim and I have probably had God knows how many conversations. I promise you, Jim, I'm going to get you money for the port of Charleston. This guy is relentless, but I mean it. Why? At the end of the day, folks, this is all about the reason I love this guy. It's all about according people the dignity they deserve. And that means just a fighting chance to have a decent job. You know, I know a lot of you have heard about how China's going to eat our lunch. Give me a break. Give me a break. If it takes just a second here, there's an outfit called the Boston Consulting Group that the Fortune 50 companies have hired. They pointed out something really basic that you've been saying a long time. American workers, South Carolina workers, are 3 times as productive as any worker in China. That's a fact. That's not chauvinism. That's a fact. American workers, American entrepreneurs, American companies are more innovative, imaginative than any country in the world, including in China. How many times have you heard graduation speeches down here of someone standing up and saying, since the mid-90s, China produces 6 times as many engineers as we have? They do. Name me one product that they brought to the international market. Name me one innovative change they've made. Why? Because in order to innovate, you have to challenge orthodoxy. You have to challenge what went before. And you can't do that in a country that doesn't allow you to breathe free and speak openly. That's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us who we are. I don't have a doubt in my mind that we'll continue to be the world's leading economy in this decade and beyond. And put this in perspective, we want the Chinese economy to grow. when I was over in China, because I do a fair amount of I have a relationship with President Xi that was asked to be set up by, remember, President Hu, sounds like it, President Hu of China and President Barack Obama 3 years ago said they wanted me to get to know the vice president, who's now the president. I spent 10 days with him. I had to go over to China after our Republican friends caused our national rating to be downgraded. And I went over to China, and they talked about how, well, we understand you might come back. And I stood in the great hall of the people with the president of China and said, we appreciate your concern, but you know, there's no need for you to come and buy American T-bills anymore. It's not a problem. And the State Department guys had apoplexy. And I said, because you only own 1% of all the financial instruments in this country. Let me remind you, it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Why? Because we have the strongest middle class in the world. On taxes. And I'll end this, man, because I could go on for a long time about these Republicans. The Republican budget is more of the same. Protect some tax breaks for the wealthy. I thought we'd been there before. We saw that movie before. We know how it ends. But in their budget, they've called for continuing a $4.5 billion tax break for oil companies who made over $19 billion in profit. They continue. They call for a new tax cut. You won't believe this, but after that, they're still calling, Jim will tell you, for a $245,000 a year average tax cut for people making more than $1 million. That's what they're calling for. New. Folks, we've had enough of this. It got us in the economic mess we're in the first place, and we're not going back. That's why we insisted. And this last thing is, I always have to be the bearer of bad news because I'm always asked at the end to negotiate these fiscal cliff deals. Well, the last one wasn't a bad deal. We insisted that people at the top bracket, when the Bush tax cut expired, go back to what they were paying before. Not as a punishment. I met with over 40 CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies. They all agreed the number should go up. What did it do? It raised $600 billion and cut our deficit by another $600 billion. Folks, look, the draconian cuts on the middle class and the elderly, why do they do it? People will say, Joe, it's hard to believe this is what these guys are proposing. Folks, in order for them to be able to continue to provide for these massive tax cuts to corporate America and to the very wealthy, that's the only way they can do it, other than ballooning the deficit even more than they already have. That's why they talk about it the way they do. That's why they call for these cuts to the middle class. And by the way, they talk a lot about deficits. Let me tell you what Jim and the Congress and my president have done. We've reduced the deficit over the next 10 years already by $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion. And the proposal is to gain another $1.5 trillion. The difference is we do it fair. As Congressman Spratt will tell you, that'll get us to the magic number. Every economist you talk to, folks, will tell you if you get debt to GDP below 3%, that's when things take off. Well, that's exactly what the president's proposal will do. It would get it down to 2.1% of GDP. That's a fancy way of saying you don't have to break the back and the spine of the middle class to have this country grow. The only way you can make it grow is give them a chance. Folks, like you, I believe in the future of this country. Some people say I'm an optimist. When you read in the national press, they refer to me as the White House optimist, like I'm the new kid in the place. Well, I'm optimistic for a simple reason. I know the history of the journey of this country. And never have the American people, when we give them an even chance, never, ever, ever have the American people let us down. They're not asking for anything special. American people are only asking what they paid for and a level playing field. Just give them a fighting chance. You know, You can't be out-competed. They can't out-innovate us. You can't outproduce us. No country in the world has the capacity to do that. They really don't. Both our business enterprises, our entrepreneurs, our American people, how productive they are. Folks, let me conclude by saying, and one of the things that bothers me most about the new Republican Party is how down on America they are, how down on our prospects they are, how they talk about how we're getting clobbered, how they talk about things that have no relationship to reality, all in the name of making sure that the very few at the top do very well, because they're not bad guys. They actually believe it. They actually believe if you free up completely the top 1%, somehow all this will trickle down. It never has. It never will. My Republican colleagues who talk about us being in decline, let me remind them. It's never, ever, ever in the history of this country been a good bet to bet against the American people. Look, folks, the middle class is coming back. The American people are coming back. The country is coming back. And I am absolutely positive, not because of Barack Obama and Joe Biden, but because of the nature of the American people. We continue to give them half a chance. We will maintain ourselves the dominant economy in the world, and quite frankly, in order for us to do what the world needs done, we need to be the dominant economy, because that's the only thing that allows us to do what we do in our foreign policy and our national security. So, folks, as my grandpa Finnegan would say, keep the faith. We're coming back. South Carolina's coming back, and America's on its way back. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.